Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information and free resources such as articles, case studies, videos, a self-assessment against the standard, and much, much more.
Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast for sustainable procurement. I'm Sean McCarthy, Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company. I'm delighted to introduce in part two of two podcasts with Ines Christison, where Ines talks about the value chain for his company and their efforts to supply more sustainable cleaning products. I guess we could talk about sport for a long time, but tell us your story from there. Where have you moved on to, and where do you go from here?
So after doing my undergraduate degree, I then, fully decided that this, was what I wanted to do. I wanted to help businesses be more sustainable, and across all different industries. So I went and did a master's in climate change policy at King's in London. Still following the sport at the moment, but this was kind of real eye-opener. It took an interest, and then going and learning a year about it and studying became completely invested in everything to do with sustainability, particularly within business. I just found it fascinating the ways that you can link together new innovations, and I think one of the things that interested me the most was the aspect of actually looking at businesses from a carbon point of view is a good way of making businesses more efficient. I think to begin with, there's so many different ways that you can achieve cost savings, improve employee benefits, employee retention. I think all these things were just like really interesting things that I was starting to learn from this course. And in my eyes, just made complete sense. I think at the time, culture was kind of shifting for more sustainability. Younger people and older were kind of pushing for all these kind of ideals, and I think it was only really a matter of time before businesses really started to take that in. So did my master's. Obviously COVID hit, had a couple of years out at that point. I was at home, but then I started working with Delphis as their sustainability analyst. So got to the point where I was able to put all of the stuff that I'd learned in my master's into practice. And it was, a great time to start there, really. Delphis at the time were doing a lot of really, really cool things with all of their products. But Delphis in itself is an eco-cleaning products company, but it was started about 16 years ago by our founder, Mark Yankovic. And he's very cavalier, he's very passionate, very sustainable guy. And he has been trying to push sustainable cleaning chemicals since 2008, really kind of when there wasn't really a market for it. So over the last couple of years, what we've been really trying to do, and I think it's been a really cool project to be a part of, is completely understand all of the carbon emissions involved in the business from our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So that's kind of been the journey up to this point in terms of, where I became passionate about it, did my master's and started working for Delphis. So it's kind of been a long journey getting to this point now. But what we're doing now is incredibly, I think, very cool. And not a lot of it is being done across the industry to the level that we're kind of doing it at, which I've been kind of given free rein to go for it. So, that means there's a lot of responsibility around moving this forward. But I think having that buy-in all the way from the top, from our CEO, is what businesses kind of need to know that they can go forward as best as they can. So
that's great. Thank you. I mean, I guess if we look at carbon, really scope 1 and 2, we should all be able to deal with that. It takes a bit of effort, it takes a bit of expertise and energy, but scope 1 and 2 is a lot of organizations are now well down the track, and if they're not, they should be, because they won't be in business much longer if they don't. So tell me about the challenges around scope 3, because this is where it gets really complicated.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. Scope 1 and 2 for us is very minimal, and scope 3 for us is around 95% of all of our emissions. So this one is the beast that we've got to tackle. But I think the biggest challenges, I think, have been around getting buy-in from your suppliers. It's trying to get them on board that this is now a priority for us as a business and us as a relationship, because we've got a punchy goal of being net zero by 2035 across scope 1, 2 and 3. So we've committed to that. We've pledged that we're going to do that, and for us to be able to reach that, we actually have to have buy-in from our suppliers to reach that goal. So I think this year has been all about, educating our suppliers, letting them know that this is actually an important aspect of our business, getting them on side with all the information that we need to record our emissions from what they're doing. And so I think, the biggest 100%, the biggest challenge was getting them on side and sort of saying to them, like, this isn't a one-off process. We're going to need, this information every year, and we need your support. We need to work together collaboratively to change perhaps our product material. But I think the interesting thing is as much of it is a challenge, a lot of it is a challenge in terms of, the time that you're putting into it. I actually feel that we got a lot of positive feedback from our suppliers.
So we've talked about carbon emissions, and most organizations should be able to get a grip on their scopes 1 and 2. This shouldn't be difficult. If you haven't already, if you're listening out there, then you really need to, because otherwise you won't be in business for very long. Scope 3 is entirely different. It's a much bigger challenge and much more complex. So would you like to tell us about your challenges around scope 3 and how you're addressing them?
Yeah, of course. Like you said, scope 3 is the big one. For most businesses, it's around 80% of their carbon emissions. For us, it's actually a lot higher. So for us, our carbon emissions are concentrated in the supply chain in scope 3 emissions, which is around 95%. So, we're not going to be reaching net zero if we do not reduce our emissions down in the supply chain. And the biggest challenges that we've kind of faced at the beginning of this year in terms of actually recording our scope 3 emissions, which is kind of the first stage in our journey. I think without actually being able to understand your emissions, where your hotspots are coming from throughout your supply chain, then it's very difficult to kind of move forward from this. So the biggest challenge was kind of talking our suppliers, letting them know that this is what we're doing now, this is what we're going to need from them, and kind of getting them to buy into the idea that, yes, this is actually happening. We've committed to reaching net zero by 2035. We've pledged. Our CEO was just in Dubai at COP28 telling everyone this. So, we've bought in, this is what we want to do. And it's about trying to get our suppliers on board. And to be honest, it wasn't necessarily that any of our suppliers weren't on board with it. I think they all understood the idea behind sustainability. I think we're actually at that point now where, a lot of companies would buy into this idea of, supporting other companies into their sustainability efforts. But I think the biggest challenge with them was kind of just a knowledge gap between, what we were kind of asking them. I mean, a lot of our suppliers didn't know what scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. We kind of get used to it. We're in our business is very sustainable centric. So we kind of understand all these emissions, but actually I think the first port of call with talking to our suppliers was actually educating them on what that kind of looks like what do we kind of need, what are carbon emissions, how does that associate to a business, what are the different areas such as energy, biodiversity, all these different areas that kind of contribute to this whole pot, was kind of the biggest challenge. So we spent a lot of time having meetings with all of our suppliers at the beginning just to sort of preface where we were going. And I think as much as that has been a real challenge, in the end, over the course of the last year, you know, they're all talking about those emissions, and they're all starting to get interested in it. So I think from us just being able to talk to them to get what we want, having to make them understand, we've kind of actually taught our suppliers a lot of things. And I think over that kind of year, it's kind of strengthened our relationship massively, because they're now interested in it. We're obviously interested in it. They're now sending us, you know, new product innovations around sustainability. So that was our biggest challenge, but we managed to get massive buy-in from them, which has been fantastic.
So this is about working with your suppliers rather than the way sometimes traditionally sustainable procurement is looked at, to say we go out to tender, you know, we include sustainability in the evaluation criteria and we try to pick the most sustainable supplier. Or, you know, I join one of these rating organizations, I won't name them, where they can get a score and they can get a rating. For you, this has been much more about hands-on, proactive dialogue with your suppliers.
Absolutely. I mean, all of our supplies were picked with sustainability in mind to begin with. So you're absolutely right. I think one of the most important things is, if you have the opportunity, is to procure from a sustainable business. That you're going to get your biggest wins right there. But in that, I think we certainly have had we've had these relationships from the very beginning of the business for, you know, 10 plus years. So our policy around, I mean, some companies will run a pretty hard line around it, around, if you're not sustainable, we're moving. We don't have that option really as well. We're restricted in the sense that, you know, we're an SME, we don't have huge resources, and just having the option to just take, you know, moving companies across isn't hugely an option for us when we have such fantastic relationships with our suppliers that we already have. So I think for us, it's very much, for now, it's about doing what we can with who we've got. And I think it's something to be said about, you know, for us, we want to change how other people practice as well, right? So, you know, we've got these great bunch of suppliers. So I think the dialogue between us has very much been like, please come on this journey with us, change how your business is operating in line with how we want to do, because it's a benefit for all of us. And that's kind of how we see how we're going to get there. So yeah, it's 100% a dialogue. You know, has to be said, we do try and make moves where we can if some suppliers are not able to provide what we're doing, you know, to the degree completely that it's just not sustainable, then we have moved, but only on small practices, not all of our bigger suppliers that kind of are the biggest impact on our scope 3.
So tell me about data, because the whole issue of getting suppliers on board clearly is critical. And I would agree with you 100%. It's all about education and dialogue rather than continually swapping suppliers. And as you say, yes, if you can buy from a supplier in the first place with good sustainability credentials, that's great. But as we all know, once you start talking about scope 3 and starting getting into the detail, there is the knowledge gap is absolutely massive. So getting them on board is one thing, but then ultimately, to achieve your scope 3 ambitions, you need the data. How's that going for you?
Yeah, completely right. Without the data, you are pretty lost. So we made it quite clear as a goal for us this year that that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted full visibility across our supply chain, across the whole business, around where our emissions are actually coming from. And to do that, we started off doing it in-house, doing it by ourselves. The reality was that it was me doing all of this. And I don't think it was necessarily that we couldn't do it, but it was, again, it's a resource restriction, you know, from being in an SME. We're a team of 18. The sustainability team is only me. So I started the year trying to get all of the information together, looking at the greenhouse gas protocol, which is a really good document to show you exactly how you actually record them, and then using some of the government carbon emission conversion factors to try and, you know, record some of the easier things like our energy, which was very easy to do. I mean, even getting our suppliers, sending a survey out and just getting an understanding about their energy usage, their energy mix, and the smaller things like that you can record quite easily on your own with the conversion factors that the government free issue out to everyone. I think the complexity that we found at the beginning, that after that period, was getting granular, getting strong granular data. There aren't a huge varied open source free conversion factor sites out there for us to be able to get all of those. We also wanted to centralize all of our data into one nice area. As like I said, as a small team, we rely on technology a lot to kind of make sure that, you know, my CEO has his saying is just every day, like, just hands off the wheel, like try as hard as you can to take the hands off the wheel so that you can actually look at what you're doing versus doing all of the manual inputting. So yeah, in a nutshell, basically we struggle to have the time to do all of this by ourselves. So we partnered up with this really great carbon accountancy business called Zaviro. And this was a real game changer in terms of how we could start to look at data. When we were going out and looking for a carbon accountancy business to partner up with, the key point for us was we need someone that can integrate into all of our systems, all of our supplier systems, and just bring that data through, you know, seamlessly. We wanted, like I said, we wanted hands off the wheel. So Zaviro were able to integrate into our inventory management software and essentially just scrape all of our products. And in that process, we've been able to deconstruct all of our products into their labels, their bottles, the triggers, all of the liquid inside, all the different ingredients associated with that. And we were able to, once you've assigned your carbon emission to one of those sectors, you can essentially just start pulling all of that data through. That's been a real game changer, and something that I don't think I would have been able to have achieved just on my own. The Zaviro team are a team of 4, 5, 6 people working on this account as well. So they brought a new level to our data strength. Like I said, this year's been all about just gathering all of that data, working with our suppliers. The suppliers now provide all of their carbon data that is needed to our partners at Zaviro. And what that's looked like in the end is really, really interesting. All of that hard work kind of launched about a couple of weeks ago, where we now have full visibility. So we now know that our purchased goods and services and our goods in our scope 3 is our biggest emissions, which, you know, obviously you think it, you know, you probably can make a good guess at the time, but it's interesting to understand exactly what proportion that makes up of it. And for us, this was a really large proportion of it. So we now know that going into next year, that this is something we have to target massively, whether or not that's changing the product material, reducing the weight of it, or changing some ingredients in our formulations. So yeah, that's been an incredibly sort of, I would say it's been really exciting. It's been really cool to actually take all, you know, have an idea of what you wanted at the beginning of the year, and then finally see all of your business mapped out in carbon emissions, you know, looking at our delivery, our transport, you know, even little things like our employee commuting. We now understand exactly, you know, how much it actually takes just to even get our staff coming into the office, making changes around that. It's the small things, but all the big things that you kind of never really could picture in your head until you kind of see it from a data point of view. So yeah, it's been a really good journey. I think it's good to mention as well is, once we've kind of had all of these bits put together, is that we're now not only just able to kind of, you know, look internally at where our emissions are coming from and, you know, plan for 2024 to kind of reduce our emissions, but we're also now really able to offer our customers a better insight into why they're buying our products. So we can give them, we've just released a full carbon customer report, and the key highlights from this report is what your impact is at Delphis versus an industry average. So you can kind of really see exactly where we sit as a company within the industry. And the second thing is they can see exactly what their carbon emissions are from all of our products. And the idea being that they can, see that every year that should be coming down. So, and they can see that, all of that broken down into the boxes, the triggers, the labels, the ingredients. So I think we're this year's been a game changer for us in terms of how we're now moving forward. So yeah, it's been great.
So what we're talking about, of course, now is the whole value chain. So it's collecting real data from suppliers as opposed to using financial proxies, but then actually feeding that through to providing information to your customers about the product that you sell, which presumably then gives you a form of competitive advantage, even though you're a small business.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't, to begin with, that wasn't really what we were going for, to be honest. We actually were purely going for it. It was like, we just need to understand what our carbon emissions are business. We just want to understand where our hotspots are, where can we make the most gains. But this year, which I think is 100% a reflection of the way that all businesses are moving towards, is that we're getting more and more of our customers coming to us and just going, have you got carbon emissions data around your products? We're doing a scope 3 analysis on our business, and we just want to know if you can give us that data. And so over that year, we were kind of just like, no, we can't actually. But we can tell you we're sustainable. We can tell you that we've got the different materials that we use for our products, but can't actually tangibly tell you exactly what that is. So over the course of the year, that's been happening more and more and more, to the point where we were just like, this is, actually something that customers are 100% wanting, whether or not they're asking for it or not. So yeah, it's really turned into this piece now where when we can now offer this service to our customers, which, to our knowledge, from what we've been able to find, is we haven't been able to see anyone else providing this kind of thing to them. So yeah, it's from this data, yeah, you're completely right. The value add that we can add to our customers has been huge.
So thanks very much, Inez. This is a fantastic example of moving from what I would call the greenwash era, where we get asked, by customers about our sustainability practice, and we tick a few boxes and we show some examples and we tell a nice story, to moving on to actually being able to provide real data. And this is where the world is going. And it was really interesting to hear from you that this is something your customers are asking for. And actually, in the past 12 months, you put the effort into getting real data from your suppliers so you can answer those questions with facts. So I'm sure our audience will find this a fascinating case study. Thank you very much for joining us. And as it's nearly Christmas, compliments of the season. Have a great Christmas and a fantastic 2024.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me on. And again, Merry Christmas to you guys as well.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on sense and sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.